And we are back for episode 3.
I know how it feels to be burnt out to the point of resigning.
Also, I realised looking back was that we needed a break. That was a time when I realised that I was tired and it made things that I should have been enjoying unenjoyable.
Why am I tired when I'm doing the right thing? It's all where you're coming from. Because maybe who they are they don't want to deal with or they don't like very much.
If you're listening to this and this is resonating, don't just keep going. Stop and evaluate.
Yeah.
Welcome to The Winning Life. My name is Gareth Morgan.
I'm Leanne Morgan.
And we are back for episode 3, where we are going to be answering this question.
The question is, why am I so tired when I am doing the right thing? Now, we didn't just ask, why am I so tired? Because I think everybody would go, yeah, I'm tired all the time.
Any tired people out there?
Even my tired is tired. Why am I so tired when I'm doing the right thing? And when we say tired, we mean like exhausted in doing the right thing. Doesn't necessarily just mean physically tired. So why am I so tired when I'm doing the right thing? And just to recap, obviously we are here on the Winning Life podcast. We're aiming this at people who really want to lead that winning life, who want to move 100%. On and maybe ask some of those conundrum questions in our life. And in the previous episode, we looked at the whole question of...
What was the question?
It was all about distraction.
I was distracted by this episode. I was focused by this episode.
The previous episode was all about, is this important or is it a distraction? And obviously we said in that episode we could have talked about that for hours because it's a huge subject.
Massive.
And I'm sure it will come up again
come back to it, I'm sure.
In other topics, other questions, because these all interlink. And that's the whole point of telling you what we talked about on our previous podcast, because all of these interlink some way, shape or form. So this question, why am I so tired when I'm doing the right thing? Because what we want to get at today is really the place that we are living from. Yeah. Because we really need to examine the kind of source where we're drawing all our effort and energy from, because if we're not, then we do get tired even when we're doing the right thing. We could be doing, great things. We could be totally on course, but we get tired. We get burnt out, I think is a better phrase to use. Have you ever felt in that position? I know I'm asking you on behalf of other people because I know you obviously very well, being married to you. But talk about a time when you perhaps were burnt out or tired, exhausted in a mental, physical, emotional or spiritual way, even though you were doing the right thing. And we'll come back to how you got out of that, but just talk about maybe that time or that experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, and for me, because I am quite driven, it can be something that blindsides you, because the vision is so important. What you're on with is so important. You relegate other things beneath that, but the thing that often can be violated is rest. It's not the subject I find easy to talk about, even more difficult sometimes to implement, but you often only discover you need it when something has happened, like a symptom catches up with you. Yeah. I think there's probably there are many occasions when that's happened to varying degrees. But a few years ago, when we made a decision to come out of, the day-to-day running of the church, and we came off salary at that time, and we made that decision, and it was led by vision. But I think what also I realized looking back was that we needed a break. We needed a break, and I think I was only, and again, this is one of the things I have to be aware of, I was only comfortable making that decision if it was led by vision, but it also was led by progress being made. Yeah. But the problem with that, and that sounds like a good thing, and it is a good thing, but rest sometimes doesn't look like progress, or it doesn't have to even look like progress. Rest is just rest, and it's needed. And without it, you won't make progress. But I think, and again, it's not as black and white as that, the whole scenario and what the decision that we made. But I think one of the things that came out of it was that I needed to feel that moment, and it was a feeling where the weight was just lifted from my shoulders for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think, that's one of the things, people talk about having a sabbatical. It's a term that's not just a religious term, although it's rooted in that. It's talked about now, in pretty much every career or industry, it's a common word, to come away from and to have kind of complete rest. And I think I often look back and think, if I'd have had a rest or a sabbatical, like would I have still made the decision? And the reality is we probably would have, because there was more to it. But I just think that probably kind of added weight to that decision, which shouldn't have, because again, just there hadn't been enough of a deep enough rest. Because again, rest is different, isn't it? It's like having a day off. And we were good with that. We got better regular. At that. We hadn't always. But even that's a regular rest. I think there are different levels of rest, aren't there? So I think that would be a scenario where, again, I think I realised looking back, I was able to then sleep at night without waking, which was unknown. And again, I didn't realise or didn't connect that to the weight that I was carrying, because you carry it consciously and subconsciously. There's a whole subconscious world, which again, as Christians, we talk about the spiritual, and the spiritual isn't some ethereal out there. I believe it absolutely is quantified by science. It is the subconscious realm of the human being, much of which we don't understand or don't know. And so, anyway, without diving into that, I would say that was a time when I realised that I was tired, and it made things that I should have been enjoying unenjoyable. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously that currently looking at that was not even, that was 3 years ago now from this point.
3.5, yeah.
And actually that whole period affected us both in very different ways. After 20 years basically of going at it with no real rest other than the usual breaks and holidays and whatever, but it's like you said, it's not that what we were doing was wrong, is we were probably running on empty. And you hear that term, and there's been books written on it, so we're not going to profess to be experts in any way, shape or form other than we've experienced it. And I think that qualifies you to be able to say, I know how it feels to be burnt out to the point of resigning. And I don't just mean from work, I mean resigning from life. No,
and
resigning from emotion, and even for me in that period it's a spiritual kind of exhaustion as well. You then start to question everything, which obviously has resulted in a stronger position now, which we'll probably go into, I imagine, another time. We'll talk about this a little bit deeper. But this whole thing of why am I tired when I'm doing the right thing, it's all where you're coming from. And I'm sure that lots of us can talk about this from personal experience or people that you know, that there will be people who are doing great stuff, but you can see it coming. You can see people are going to head into trouble because they are living from what we call the outside in. They're living, they're trusting in their gift, in their talent, in their resource and finance more than from who they are, because maybe who they are they don't want to deal with or they don't like very much. I know that there's times when, and again we talked about this in the previous episode, distraction. You can try and focus on the things that you can control right now. So I can just keep going because I know to a point my gift will get me there. And when a gift, I'm talking about natural talents and competencies that maybe you've even learnt over time. And that isn't a great thing to use all the time. Now, sometimes when you're thrown into a situation, it's good that you can naturally do things or, rely on your gift and talent. But to live at that small end of the scale all the time is exhausting because you're always using the kind of the dregs of the tank, if you like, rather than the point of who you are. And it's to avoid often digging deeper and dealing with some of the more important issues of who I am, what I think about myself, and even what I think about others. So let's dive into that a little bit more, because people might be sitting there going, thinking, oh, I've never thought about it that way, or maybe you have. But the whole thing of learning to love ourselves first. Now, don't switch off. We're going to explain what that means. Loving ourselves right, should I say, rather than first, in order to love and help and serve the mission that we're called to after that. So let's look at some of that.
Yeah.
Why is that something that we need to look at?
I think the key realization that I think when everybody hears it, they would I don't think anybody would argue with it, and most people would know it. But I think there's a difference between knowing something and then maybe accepting it. And that is to bring your best, you have to be at your best.
Yeah.
To bring your best, you have to be at your best. Now, none of us would want to serve up anything less than the best, especially people listening to this, because you've tuned into the winning life. So you're not just attempting life. You want to win at life. You want to grow, succeed, flourish, etc. So, you want to deliver your best, but there is a link between delivering your best and being at your best. We are so overemphasized, and I'm the worst at this, which is at being a human doing, but we are human beings first.
Yeah.
The being has to drive the doing, not the other way around. Again, like you said there, that our competency, our doing, we can just switch into that. But if you switch into that and you neglect the being, then the competency relies upon the character. The competency is, let me use the car as an example. So, you've got the wheels. This is where my knowledge is very limited. So any mechanics out there, I do apologise. We'll get you on to explain a little bit more. You can have the great wheels, great chassis, etc. But if you neglect the engine, the part that nobody really sees, the part that you don't really go showing off to anybody, because that's at the heart of it. But if you neglect the engine, then let's call the chassis the competency, the shiny things, the things that people see. You'll only see it for so long, because a great chassis with a poor engine is a poor experience of a car.
Absolutely.
And so, let me connect this to a principle. And for us as Christians, and this is such a huge couple of verses in the Bible, because we have it from Matthew 22. I'm going to read this to us, and you can go and check this out yourselves. But Jesus had somebody come to him and ask him, you could just tell that the person, whoever asked it, was really was going for the jugular, really wanted to understand what is the most important thing in life. And it says this: a teacher of the law asked Jesus which was the greatest commandment that had been given to them in the law. And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This, Jesus said, is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Now you have to realize the law and the prophets is a way of describing the Old Testament and everything that had gone before, the centuries. So all of the centuries of activity, all that had been spoken of in the 39 chapters of the Old Testament, and that had led up to this point, Jesus simplifies it and distills it down to these two commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Everything, he says, hangs upon it. Not is just influenced by it, hangs upon it.
Yeah.
So if you violate these two commands, it affects everything. It doesn't just influence it. And you've got two commands there. The first one, how we see God and how we approach God. And then you've got the second, how we approach others in relation to ourselves. So why am I so tired when I'm doing the right thing? Well, I might be doing the right thing because I love people. The person I'm serving could be a customer, it could be a client, could be a family member, it could be a community. I may be doing something if I have a relationship with God and I see my work as a vocation or a calling. I could be trying to bring my best, to God. But ultimately, these, if you were to imagine 3 circles, and I draw this in the book, 3 interlocking circles, you can't truly love God or others until you deal with how you see yourself. You can't see yourself as a worm, as nothing, as useless, as terrible, and it not affect, dare I say, even poison how I see other people and how I see God. And if you're not a believer in God, then let me just say, like, your future, ultimately, God gives us our future.
Yeah.
But how you see your future is tainted by how you see other people, which is connected to how you see yourself. So I think unpacking that a little bit would be really helpful to us, because until we do a deep dive on how do I truly see myself, am I truly looking after the vessel? Because this again is a really important analogy, and the Apostle Paul talks about this. He talks about it in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, I think it is, or chapter 4, where he talks about the fact that we are vessels that have jars of clay that have treasure inside. You've got treasure in you, you've got value, you've got potential. But the vessel, whilst you may look at the vessel and think, well, I'm just ordinary, but the vessel is important.
Yeah.
It delivers the value. If you were to buy something, a drink from a shop, the content may be a fantastic drink, but the vessel also counts.
Yeah.
What it looks like, is it dirty? Is it, is it clean? The vessel counts. And so if we don't value the vessel, if we don't value and look after how we see ourselves, it actually affects everything else.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to let you know that in every episode, Gareth and Leanne will be talking about the importance of getting a plan for your personal and professional life. That's why they've developed the MVP plan. When you develop your MVP plan, surprising opportunities and uncommon results follow. Visit thewinninglife.tv today to get access to your plan and the steps on how to use it. Let's head right back over to their episode.
Like you said there in those verses from Matthew 22, all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. So that just reminds me, when you talked about literally, it isn't just, this is one way you could do it. Everything hangs on that. It's like I began to think of the planets in the solar system. They are hanging in space by the fact that God has put them there. So it isn't like, for us, it's a preferential way of living. Like, it doesn't really hang on. It's there or there. It's not. You pick which way you want to live. Because so many people are looking at their life going, well, I'm choosing, my preferred way of living is this. But, God didn't kind of set these things out and go, well, that's my preferred option, but you can do what you want. Just like with this, the planets aren't there just because by chance. Everything is hanging on his word. So actually if we want the best for our life, we have to understand that everything hangs on this, how we live our lives, how we relate to other people. It isn't just a nicer way to live your life. It is the way. It's the created way of, understanding. When I put these things into an order, fruitfulness, results come, and then I don't suffer the exhaustion mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, even when I'm doing the right stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key, is this isn't just a preferred way of life, this is actually how to get it right.
Oh,
that's
100%.
really, really key. So I forgot what you were asking me the question before, because I just went off on a tangent. No. But it's how we learn to look at ourselves. Like you said, it's the deep dive, I think you were talking about, evaluating ourselves. So where on earth do we start? Because obviously this is not something we're going to wrap up in the next 10 minutes. This isn't like a quick 3-point, do this, and you've got your life sorted. This requires an ongoing, daily, and, for us, we talk about discipleship, which is not just a one-off thing. This is something that we train ourselves in, that we learn all the time. So it's daily evaluation, looking at my heart, looking at myself, my character, and really examining how I see things, how I speak about myself, how I speak about others, what I truly believe about, because it starts with the belief, myself, God and others. So where on earth do we start?
The clue is in Jesus' response. So again, in preface to the first commandment, he talks about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So let's just stop there, because he then goes on to link and to love your neighbor as yourself, because he says the second is like it. So there's a pattern in what he's just said that gives us a clue as to how we go and love people and love ourselves accordingly and in a correct manner. And he says there's an order, and there's an order in the words: heart, soul, mind, and strength. Again, we unpack this in the book, but heart is what you believe. Okay, it's your belief, it's the principle, it's who you believe you are, it's who you believe God is. So it all starts with who. So ultimately, I am going to, a symptom of being tired doing the right thing is usually because I've violated rest, and it's usually because I don't value myself enough to give it that rest, because I'm overworking to overcompensate for a lack of self-worth. So the symptom is overworking. The root cause is because of a lack of self-worth. Therefore, I need to clarify, well, who am I? I need to clarify that, which is about valuing the person of who I am. Again, where this is linked in those three circles is ultimately, you can value yourself without being a Christian. People can have self-esteem, they can have self-worth. But again, it's not an on or off switch, it's a dial. When you realize an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God loves you, the level of self-worth that gives you takes the dial up, I don't know how many levels, because I can love myself without believing in God. But when I realize, wow, but a powerful God has created me, then all of a sudden that dial can go right up, and that then dials up how I love people, how I love myself. So again, it's really key to start there. So it starts with belief, the who, heart, then soul. It starts with how I feel, okay, and feelings are driven by those beliefs. And so again, I often feel tired because I've lacked motivation. What is motivation? It's a feeling. Okay, so I'm losing motivation because I'm not seeing the worth in who I am, and in that moment, I need to bring that mood into alignment. So
that's interesting. I was going to say, because lots of people say I can't help the way I feel. Is that a true statement?
No. You can't. Part of what they're saying is right, as in I can't help a feeling coming.
Yeah.
But I can help what I do with that feeling. So maybe my answer was a bit too short.
No, but I actually agree, because I think we can train our feelings.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're putting our feelings ahead and our soul ahead of our spirit of who we are.
Yeah.
Because I know, and you've used this analogy before, when you loved me, hopefully, as your wife.
Oh, yes.
But, there have been times when, like you talked about the times when I was pregnant, when
throwing up
very
over
sick.
the side of the toilet bowl.
For, all three of our children, I had hyperemesis. I was very, very sick. Didn't look particularly wonderful for those months either, and constantly vomiting. In that moment, you didn't look at me when I was throwing up going, oh, I love her so much. I mean, maybe you did, but it was a choice. It was a belief in that moment. I love my wife. I'm going to support her through this. And maybe you've been through similar things with people that you love. It's a choice that out of that, the feelings come. It started with a feeling, hopefully, of, oh, I love her. Yeah. She looks nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then actually, you make a decision in that moment. So actually, when people say, I can't help the way I feel, that is, like you said, it's partially true. We can't 100%. Help the way our feelings talk to us, but we can actually train our feelings.
Absolutely.
In the correct way.
But like you said, these are all interlinked.
It's what comes first.
Belief, then the mood or the feeling. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. We can align that mood to the belief. So this isn't a pick and choice of these 4 things like heart, soul, mind, and strength. There's an order. You need all 4 in that order. So if heart is belief, the soul is motivational feeling or emotion, then mind is focus, is thoughts. Okay, so it's then about taking charge of your emotions and your thoughts. Okay, saying I am going to choose to think on these things. So again, when I'm tired, coming back to the question, and I'm doing the right thing, usually that tiredness is caused because of a competing thought. A thought that maybe, for instance, especially if I'm starting to doubt why I'm doing the right thing, or, is it being appreciated, or all these different things that come in, then that thought is pulling us away. It's almost like having a leak in your car. Like you can have a leak in your car and it can be a slow leak and you can keep driving for maybe 100, 200 miles, but eventually you're going to be empty.
Yeah.
And so again, the third part, mind, is focus, it's thoughts. And the final part is with all your strength, your body. It's physical. So again, why am I tired? Doing the right thing? Well, there's a physical element. Am I exercising? Am I eating the right things? And again, all of those things are connected to thoughts, connected to feelings, but on this connected to the seat of our beliefs. And again, that's interlinked. My beliefs are driven by, who is the higher power that I surrender to? Is it ultimately just what I think, or is it God? Again, these are the things that we have to do a deep dive in and almost a diagnostic on when we hit these points. And again, we don't want to just be reactive to these points, do we? We want to create a rhythm of health that mean that we don't arrive at this place.
Exactly. You don't want to hit burnout before you sit, because actually it can take a lot longer to sort those things out, as we know from experience. If you keep burying stuff and brushing it under the carpet, you're going to trip up eventually with the stuff that's under the carpet.
There is a cost to not dealing with something, even
definitely.
if right now you can't quantify it. It's having an effect. It's having a cost. Out of the overflow of our lives, it affects, it influences. And so we've got to take stock. And again, through this whole process, through what we're doing with this podcast, through what we're doing with the MVP program, we're wanting to help people to take charge of their lives, to rule and govern their lives, to dominate their lives, so that they can truly be their best, bring their best, because ultimately that is what honors God. That is what honors other people.
Yeah. When
we take charge and take care of ourselves. And also we need accountability with that.
Definitely, absolutely. And you mentioned, I think it was in the previous episode, about, you're a very achievement-driven person, and some people, they will identify with that. Like, unless they've achieved something, they feel like they're failing. For me, that's not the thing that, I want to achieve, but that's not the thing that makes me fall down. For me, it will be, I need to have that assurance and know that things are being okay. But does it matter what your soul appetite is? If you're not living from the right place, that's why you get tired, because you're trying to get those things externally to feed something which is never going to work. So for you, it will look like, I'll just do more to make up for whatever that is. For me, I'll go and seek assurance. So it'd be controlling a situation, or constantly leaning on others, which is why then a burnout, a breakdown, a whatever you might call it, will look different for different people, because it's how your soul, how your mind is reacting to the fact that your heart, your spirit is perhaps not in a great place. So this is something that we've just kind of scratched the surface on, really, because again, these are the things that we want to talk about ongoing. This isn't a one-stop shop fix, done, right, move on. This is an ongoing, almost like layers building up. How do I do this? And it's important, like you were saying, to do this in conversation with somebody else as well. Obviously, if you're a disciple of Jesus Christ, you pray and we do this with the Holy Spirit, but it's important to get with others who are, you know, either further ahead or going through it with you, that you talk about this, because actually speaking about it and talking about how you see yourself, how you see that is really, really important. Can't keep it all in here. So,
100%. Just by way of signing off, if you're listening to this and this is resonating, don't just keep going. Stop and evaluate. Engage in that conversation. You need to take care of you, because it's connected to your mission.
Yeah, and I think maybe at some point it would be good to look at what does rest look like for different people, because what you find restful, I don't find restful. And we're not just talking about kicking back and watching Netflix here. In fact, I'm probably thinking the opposite to that. That's escapism. That's not rest.
There's a difference. Oh, that's a good episode. Escapism versus rest.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that in the future. So there we go.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you again. Remember, there is more in you than you think. Make sure you value it. Make sure you look after yourself. And we'll see you next time.
We hope that you enjoyed that episode. And if you enjoyed it, please go and subscribe over on all of our channels on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook, and not forgetting your favourite podcast platform. And if you head over to thewinninglife.tv, you'll be able to find all the resources available to you. Gareth has written several books which will help you on your discovery to building stronger and better lives. Come and join us for the next episode.